Okay, welcome back, and thank you for the opportunity to end the exercises, and then we will talk about the lecture in a whole. Well, we were at the ISLM model, and what have we done? We have talked about the general equilibrium or the overall equilibrium in B and C, and then we calculated a fiscal impulse and we calculated a monetary impulse, and as we did it in the Keynesian commodity market, also in the ISLM model, or as always, I would recommend that you also draw a little diagram, because then also I think you know what you are doing when you do the calculations. So let's draw the diagram for the ISLM model, and interest rates income, and let's have a look at the IS equation. I have here the dependence, or let's just take this one. So this is, oops, or let's take also the LM equation. This is this one. So IS and LM. So unfortunately, I solved it for Y and not for I. And then you have to be careful when you want to draw the function, because as always, the economists are doing this. I have switched the axis. So the single variable is on the left here, Y, and this is the variable on the horizontal axis, and from school, f of x, depending on x, you have it just the other way around. So then we ask, what is y if interest rates are 0? So interest rates are 0, then we are here. If we insert here I equals 0, then of course we end up with 60 for y. So we are here at 60, and the other way around, what is interest rates if y is 0? So 0 equals 60 minus 400i, and then we obtain 400i equals 60, and then we have I0. We can determine this to 3 over 20, and this is 15 over 100. So we are here at 15%. And then you can draw roughly the IS curve. Then we go to the LM curve. Again, setting I interest rate to 0. Then we have 25. So we start then roughly here with 25. And then, of course, we could also calculate 1 point, but you always have only to draw a sketch. Also, when I ask in the exam, please draw a diagram. Always you just sketch it. It must not be right 100%. So then we can have a look. We have here a slope of minus 400. And here we have a slope of 100. So at the first look at it, the slope of 400 is steeper than the slope of plus 100 in absolute value. But we have switched the axis. So if we want to draw the LM curve, then this has to be in our diagram steeper than the IS curve. Just think about it at home, okay? So this has to be steeper, and therefore we are here at the LM curve roughly. And then we have the overall equilibrium. And there we can have a look. We have calculated this. The overall equilibrium was 7% and 32. And you see here, roughly from the scaling, it, well, quite fits, I would say. So this was Y star, and this was I star. And then let's switch to red. We had delta G is 1. This meant that we had an increase of this constant factor in the IS curve from 60 to 64. We argued in the lecture that an increase of government expenditure should shift the IS curve to the right. Well, what happens here? We have the same slope. We have a larger number here. So we start here at 64. And then, since the slope is the same, it has to be in our calculation a parallel shift. So this would be then the IS of delta G, I name it. Okay? Well, you could also calculate this intersection, but you don't need it. You know roughly, okay, I have to shift it parallel, and then it's okay. So, and then, of course, we have the new equilibrium. And this was then 32.8, and here we had 7.8%. And let's name this then I star delta G, and here Y star delta G. Okay? That we know that the red one is due to the fiscal policy, the increase of government expenditure by 1. And then we take the increase of nominal money amount was 10. And there we calculated that also we only have a new constant factor increasing from 25 to 30. Also, the slope stays the same. So what does it mean? We have this right shift and also parallel LM of delta M to the right, starting at 30. And then we have also Let's do this a bit other way. A bit better. This one and this one, and now green one. And this would be then 36 y star delta m and 6% I star delta m. Okay, and now the last qualitative question is, we have in general, so to speak, summarize comparing the pure commodity market Keynesian model with the ISLM model and with the ASAD model, and why is the impact of fiscal or monetary policy becomes less and less and less if we start to relax our assumptions in our models. And this is maybe also best done in a diagram. Oh, started the recording? Yeah. So let's see how it works. We need now 4 diagrams, 3 below each other and 1 on the left. So I start with a commodity market. YD and Y. Keynesian commodity market. And there we had YD equals Y and our equilibrium. So, and what happens there if we make fiscal policy plus delta G? This meant that we have an upward shift of YD and then the impact delta Y, sorry, then this distance here would be the impact of fiscal policy within the commodity market model. And why is this larger than in the ISLM model when we add the money market and flexible interest rates? Well, this we derived in the following way. Y and I, and we came from the left. I L M over P. And there we argued, let's think this starting Y star is the long run equilibrium and that we had here an IS and an LM curve. Remember how we derived the IS curve, varying interest rates, and the LM curve, let's say we started from a situation like this, M over P, L of I and Y. So fiscal policy in the ISLM model changes only the IS curve. And what happens? It happens that the IS curve shifts just by this amount here. By this length, we have to shift the IS curve to the right. Because why? This YD curve is a special YD curve for a fixed interest rate. And if we shift now YD upwards, the new equilibrium point corresponds still to the same interest rate. So if this was the starting interest rate, this point here has, in red, sorry, has to shift just to this point here. But this deriving the IS curve, the new IS curve, we have to do with every point on the old IS curve. So this means also that this point has go to the right, this point, and this point. So this means we have this shift here, IS of delta G. But now we have the flexible interest rates, we have the money market via the LM curve, feeds in. And so we have not this total fiscal impulse, but by increasing interest rates, investment is going down. And then let's take, no, green I had in monetary policy, let's take violet, then only Y star double prime maybe. Then only this one is the impulse on income. So change in income in Keynesian commodity market and this one change in income in ISLM is smaller than Keynesian commodity market due to rise in interest rates, and this we called crowding out. So to speak, government expenditure interpreted as government investments crowds out private investments via rising interest rates. And then we go to the ISLM model. We flexibilize prices, and this we add here. So also we assume we were in the long run equilibrium. Let's assume that we had this as AD and this as AS. So again, this new, think again on the derivation of the AD curve. We derived the AD curve that we calculated, or that we looked at the intersection of ISLM, but this income here now corresponds to a specific price level. And this is this price level here. Then we come at the AD curve at this point. Now we moved out the IS curve to the right. We didn't change the price level, but we obtain then a new income level. So this new income level corresponds now still to the old price level, P0, in the ASAD diagram. So this point here, let's take also violet. This means that this point moves here to the right. But again, this thought experiment, given always fixed prices in behind, we have to do for all possible price levels. So also this point moves to the right, this point and this point. So we obtain the right shift of AD. But now flexible prices via the supply side of our market fits in. Supply doesn't follow 100% our demand. Enterprises can increase their quantity, but they can increase also their prices, and they will do it. And so we end up, let's take them orange. At this a bit lower delta Y. So change in income in the ASAD model lower than ISLM due to increasing prices. And this, starting from fixed prices only commodity market, dampens at the first, money market with interest rates, ISLM, and then flexible prices, partly flexible prices, dampens it down in the ASID model. And this is not the question in the exercise, but in the end, we can make the conclusion which we had this morning in the lecture. Well, neoclassical theory then means that the AS curve will be a straight line in a vertical position, and then this one would be the long-term AS curve, and then we would have just P0 up to P prime. Maybe we would have no impact long run, no impact, only increase in prices. And I think arguing for the monetary policy, we can go a bit faster, because even we do not have to talk about the pure commodity market, because there is no money in. So then this was fiscal policy in Keynes, ISLM, ASAD. and this we will take now. Anyway. And now monetary policy. What do we have to do? Zip, zip, zip. Zip, zip. So let's start. AS, and we start in green. What happens if we have plus delta M? Any idea? Where's the first impact? Well, we have the M here. So here we have plus delta M. So real money balances move to the right. This means that the corresponding interest rate is lowering for the income. So this point here on the LM curve moves down to this point. But all these points on the LM curve in total has to be moved downwards. So this we wanted to do in green, also green. So this one has to go downwards and everything. So we got a downward shift of the LM curve. And this would be now the change in income in the ISLM model. What does this mean now in the ASAD model? Well, this point here is corresponding to this intersection in the ISLM model. And this was calculated with a specific price level. This was here P0. But now we have a new intersection at this point, giving us this new income level, but this income level still corresponds to the same price level as before. So this shifts to the right here. The AD curve, again, this we have to do for every point on our AD curve, so we obtain a right shift correspondingly to the fiscal policy of the AD curve to the right due to increased money balances. But this now means this is the right shift, that prices are increasing, so only this one here, a bit less due to the increase of prices, is delta Y change in income in the AS AD model lower than ISLM model due to price increases. And then in the long run, shift in the vertical way of the AS curve, AS long and due intersection here, D prime, and this we have already written down. Whew. Now a fast ride to all our models, through all our models. Okay, then there was one short question left. So this A. And this question I posed because I find really awkward things in the internet. Let's talk about this also in the end. Oops. And oops. Question A. So formally that average consumption is falling with increasing income. What is average consumption? Well, this is the same as average costs. We divide total consumption by total income. So this is just total consumption over total income. Well, and if we insert this with our numbers, then of course we obtain, let's call this average consumption equals 5 plus 0.75 phi over y equals 5 over y plus 0.75. Well, and if we look at this function, then of course AC of is decreasing with increasing y. Of course, this is a fixed number, and if we divide 5 by a larger number, then this number becomes less and less and less. With which function you can compare this? This you should have already seen. I also already mentioned it also. So compare this with average costs. So this is something like a fixed cost regression which we find here. It's just the same. I think you have seen C of x, maybe 50 plus 2x as a cost function, then this is your fixed cost. And this is your variable costs. And then you have average costs is 50 over x plus 2x. And then this you have hopefully seen that you have something like this as for the average cost function. So this is conceptually actually totally the same. Why we are doing this in macroeconomics for consumption, and this is because we see from data that the richer a society, the less is the proportion which this society spends for consumption. Well, I think this is reasonable. If you are a really rich person and you have everything, then the part of your income you spend for consumption will be less. And this we find in data. And this is then the reason why we do formalize consumption via this C0 plus Cy times Y. And this is autonomous consumption, not depending on income. And if you have a look at the internet, where all these funny 3 minutes, 5 minutes videos you have, and these guys explain the Keynesian consumption function, then I would say 9 of 10 of these videos will explain this factor with, well, you can think of this as a basic income. If you do not want to starve to death, then you even have to consume if you have no income. And sorry, this is totally wrong as an explanation. Because all this, what we are talking about, this is about developed economies. And we always look at the equilibrium income. So in this diagram here, what our theory is about to explain this intersection point and not to talk about this here. And why we use this autonomous factor here, for this is the reason that the data says us that it is right. Because if we add this autonomous factor to our consumption function, then we have a function which exhibits just what we find in the data. The richer our society, the less is the proportion we spend for consumption. And nothing else, and it is not anything like basic consumption you need if you have no income or something like this. Okay. And now I'm already done with my half an hour. Please give me another 10 minutes for the summary. Sorry. So, what have we done in this lecture? So, well, we started with a motivation, hopefully. Of course, you do not have to just learn all this. But what we at first distinguished was the difference between positive and normative issues. So normative, opinion, positive, hopefully some scientific results where you can rely on it, where you have data, and where you can say, well, with 99%, I am really sure that this fact is like it is. The apple is going down from the tree and not the other way around. Then, well, this you can skip for the exam. And then we had the circular flow. You know, I always make the longer perspective. Here we are starting roughly 400 years ago, but anyway, what is important for me is this diagram here, that you more or less know how this circular flow functions, that we have these 5 sectors here, and that you know how does it function conceptually. So you do not have to recapitulate every single variable here. If I pose a specific question, then I will give you these variables. So maybe I will ask a part of it, so this part down here, and then maybe I give you some numbers here that you have to calculate the last 2 numbers because of the condition that all inflows has to equal all outflows at every sector. Yeah, that you conceptually know what is the circular flow of an economy. Then, of course, gross domestic product, the worst measure for economic performance, except all other possible measures. And that you also know within these definitions what is meant by market value, what is practically meant by all, what means especially finished. If I pose such a question in an exam, quite often the students then miss this point here, and then you have all the double counts, because within a car you have, of course, many other products in front of the production line. But we calculate for gross domestic product in the end just the 40,000 euros for the new car. Okay, goods and services, national concept and domestic concept, and of course 1 year or 1 quarter. Then I think I gave you in the exercises and in the lecture just this picture: GDP, production approach, expenditure approach, and income approach. And here we had this 2, 3, 4 components. And these numbers I also want you to recapitulate for an exam. Let's go through this. There we have here, so roughly 55% private and public services, 25% manufacturing, 15% of wholesale retail trade, and roughly 5% of the construction sector. And maybe also that you keep in mind, where do we come from? From the 70s, we have this change from a industrial production, mainly industrial production economy, to a service economy. And this is a path which you see in all developed countries from the 1970s. This is not only specific for Germany. And even the process is much faster than in Germany. So this number here, I told you, 25% industrial production. in a developed country is quite high compared to France, compared to UK, and so on. They are at a size below 20%. Then the expenditure approach here, roughly 55% of private consumption, 25% of investment and public expenditure, and roughly 5% of from the external balance. And then the labor share, roughly 2/3 or 70%, just by rule of thumb. Then more or less the next 50 slides we can just summarize via this diagram. What did we had here? Relative change in real, and this is important, GDP, roughly for a developed country 1 to 3%. If you go to developing countries, there you would say, well, 3% is not enough. Think even about China. They will have a GDP growth this year approximately 4%, and this will be quite hard for this country, because in general China is of course a developing country and really heterogeneous country. If you look at the whole country, they have the highly developed part at the east coast of China, and if you go to inner China, then it's comparable to African countries. Price level stability, relative change of CPI, and in Europe 2%. Who were in the talk, Lucas also talked about this policy aim of 2% of the European Central Bank. High level unemployment. This of course measured via the unemployment rate, and we talked about full employment by roughly 3 to 5 or 3 to 4% for Germany or even for developed countries. Well, this is always due to how what kind of social system do you have. So in the United States, maybe this number is a bit lower because they have not this a high level social system. And external balance, there this aim came from framework with fixed exchange rates, and there we can say we do not follow this aim anymore, since we have now flexible exchange rates. Compare this with the expenditure approach of GDP. We have exports are much higher than imports in Germany. There we have this number, that's the difference. External balance is 5% of GDP in Germany. Then you of course cannot say that you follow such an aim as external balance, which you could define as that the external balance is 0, or that the capital account is 0, or even that you could say, yeah, more or less not very volatile exchange rates. If you compare this with the move up and down of the euro versus the US dollar. There you have during the last years plus minus 20% in the exchange rate. Okay, then we can go through almost, because this is, of course, I think this is really important that you know that you can distinguish between nominal and real variables. So difference between nominal and real economic growth. And this we defined, and then I calculate in the lecture and in the exercise. And please do not be surprised if I also pose such a calculation in an exam. Take your exercises and, well, then what can I ask? Well, I have here, I think, roughly 20 cells. What can a lecturer do? He can give you these cells, maybe. Please calculate the other ones. Or I give you these cells here. And please calculate backward. Or I give you the cells in the medium and I ask you, please go 1 year backward and 1 year forward. Just try it over the next weeks, and if you have problems, write me an email. Inflation. What is inflation? What is the CPI, HICP? And here we also had in the exercises and in the lecture concrete calculation of inflation. And it is more or less the same as the GDP example. And actually, over the last, I don't know when did I start macroeconomics every semester. It's about 6-7 years ago. And I quite often pose questions on calculating inflation and calculating GDP. And well, GDP is price times quantity adding up. What is inflation? Price times weight and adding up. And then calculating the relative change. Once I call it economic growth, and in the other example, I call this number inflation. In my point of view, it is totally the same. What I see in the results by the student, and I don't know why, that the results for inflation are really worse than for GDP. I have no clue why it is. So please also take 1, 2, or 3 examples over the next week, calculate this, and then I think you will also manage it in the exam. Okay, and then yeah, maybe this is then one for me as a lecturer, one of these fine examples. Well, these are theoretical concepts. What is real economic growth? What is inflation, and so on? And using maybe, well, I working later on in a medium-sized company. Why do I have to bother with inflation and economic growth? But here we then really can say, well, what is inflation? And the difference between nominal and real economic growth is measured via the change of the GDP deflator, so the whole price in the economy, while inflation more or less focuses on the private consumption part. And we know private consumption is roughly 50-55% of total economy. But it is not the total economy. So these two price indices, they are differing. They will be always in, around the same numbers, but they will not be the same. And what does it mean for the economy if these numbers are not the same? Well, then we go to the labor market. And think of yourself. When you are working, then you are paid, I don't know, 15, 20 euros per hour. And then you see, think of the talk of Lucas Nö, inflation rates 10%. Then you say to you go to your enterprise and you are arguing, well, my work is as good as the last year. Prices has increased by 10%. Please, I want to have also 10% more wage, a 10% higher wage. This is an absolute rational argumentation. And then your company says, well, I'm in the production sector. We are producing all products, not only the products for private consumption. You rely on private consumption. Of course, you rely on private consumption. I think on average, you are not the large investor of something. So in general, the enterprises will say, we are producing all goods in the economy, so we have to focus on GDP deflator. And if GDP deflator is increasing, and this is the case right now, not by 10%, but only by 5 or 6%, then the guy in the enterprise said, well, I understand your argumentation, but my argumentation is that I can sell my products only with a 6% higher level than last year. So from my side, you get only 6% higher wage. And then you are struggling. And then this also is relevant for a medium-sized company. Think, for example, you are working in the steel industry. And then you have these general contracts for everybody working in the steel industry. And these two, two sides then are struggling about what will be the wage level in the steel industry for the next years, or for the next 1 year or the next 2 years. And if then you have the situation that the yellow line, the change of the GDP deflator, is below the blue line, the inflation rates, then you know that this has also an impact on your personal or your little or medium-sized company. And here we had the situation during the last 10 years until Corona in Germany that these two numbers were on one line, or even that GDP deflator was higher than the inflation rate. And if we look then at the struggles in the labor market, there were almost no struggles in the labor market. And this was more or less, in my opinion, one reason was the development of these two price indices. Okay, then we had also this little example, and this will be interesting for the next weeks. What is the impact of a single good or the energy component, mainly speaking gas and oil, on the whole consumer price index? And there we made these calculations. If this energy component is roughly 10% of the total price index, this component is changing with 10, 20, 30 percentage points. as energy prices has moved during the last month, then we calculated that just from this energy component, we had an impact on 2-3 percentage points on the whole price index. And I have the expectation that really prices will, or inflation rates will come faster down than Lukas Löh has told us today, because energy prices moved really fast downwards the last weeks. And starting from the next year on in Germany, we will have also the energy prices break. So let's see. They had, I think, a forecast of 7.4. I'm talking on Wednesday with the guys from the Handelsblatt, and we are talking about the forecast for Germany the next 2 years. I think we will make a forecast below 7%. Well, we see. You can read it then in the paper in the next weeks. Okay, then we talked about unemployment in general, and let's take this one here. The 4 different types: seasonal, frictional, cyclical component, and structural component. That you know what are these 4 types of unemployment are about. And especially, let's just move to the business cycle. Of course, you should know what is the business cycle, and especially this long-term trend here. This is potential output. And there, in the lecture, we argued that mainly our economy, the supply side, is driven from the labor market. Then we came to this vertical supply curve. Well, and this is more or less nothing else that in general the neoclassical view says that we are always in the neighborhood of this potential output. And maybe the Keynesian then says, well, these movements up and down are much more relevant in reality. And these are then the struggles between the two views we have. And if we then argue that the labor market mainly determines output, then we can also ask what impact have these 4 types on potential output. And for this, you really have to know what is the concept of potential output. Potential output is not a number you can really see. It's potential. So it is then here our technology parameter. Well, and then if we ask what is the impact of seasonal unemployment on potential output, then we have to admit almost nothing. Because why? We cannot really change the framework of, so to speak, the weather. Winter is coming and going. Well, in the long run, due to the climate crisis, we are changing the weather. But we are not talking about this in this part here. So this is a framework we cannot change, and therefore this does not change the performance of potential output, and then we can argue almost nothing. And then if I pose this question, I always, or quite not always, I quite often get the answer: what is the impact of frictional unemployment on potential output? Well, then the students argue it's very low, almost nothing, because the number of frictional unemployed people is not that high. Well, if we count them in Germany, maybe 100,000 people. And it's also a short-term unemployment, because what was frictional unemployment? This was the mismatch between you are looking for a job, and the enterprise is looking for you. And then you can think your job is situated in Munich, and you don't know that this job in Munich exists, and the enterprise does not know that you exist here at the sea. And that you match takes 3 months, half a year. And for this time you are unemployed. Well, but this is a framework which we can change if we are more transparent. If our seek process for jobs will become better. Of course, the quantitative impact then on potential output will not be that high. But here we have a type of unemployment where we really can reduce this number. Let's say that in actual times this number is 150,000. And if we have better processes in finding a job in the labor market, then maybe we can really bring down this number to 50,000. And this then, of course, increases potential output. Well, and then for the cyclical component, we argued, well, at first, of course, this is the cyclical component. But if we go then in this business cycle here, maybe we do not really come up anymore in an upswing, but in something like this, then of course, more or less the cyclical unemployment component will also decrease potential output. And then of course, the maybe most important one is the structural component, and this mainly means that we have abilities of our individuals which not match the demand of the enterprises. We can have the best coal miner in Germany. He won't find a job because we have no coal mines anymore. And this is, I think, the reason why you are sitting here. Okay. Then about the balance of payments, you can skip this for the exam. This is then more topic for international economics. I think you have international economics in semester 5 or 6, I think. Okay. Okay, and then we talked about the magic square, and then of course we can add other goals: fair balance, sustainable ecological conditions, sustainable public finance. Also, Lukas talked about this, our debt break in Germany, and business cycle we have already talked about, potential output we have already talked about, and then of course what is money, and there we have the function of money, and we have the motives of holding money. So to speak, let's say, starting with here we can say, what are the properties of money? They are of course related to the function of money, and these are of course related to the motives of holding money, demand for money. And then Fisher relation, this is actually conceptually the same when we have the difference between nominal and real GDP growth, their real and nominal interest rates. Then what is the quantitative theory of money, you should know what is the classical dichotomy and money creation, especially here where we derived the money multiplier via giving credits in the market. I think somebody of you also joined the talk from the Bundesbank. There Julia von Borstel was also talking about this process about money creation in the private banking sector. Yeah, and then I distinguished between classical monetary policy instruments here, mainly the main refinancing operation, deposit marginal lending facility minimum reserve. This I think one should know, even if in these times we have right now, tomorrow there will be with a probability of almost 100% an increase in the interest rate of the main financing operations in Europe and also in the United States. And yield curve, you know, this is maybe a specific topic. I rely very much on it, especially on the expectation theory. So what is the yield curve and how do we explain that interest rates with different for investments with different maturities fall apart? And yeah, this is just an overview. You do not have to recapitulate every single point I made here, but maybe I pose the question, well, what are the classical instruments of monetary policy and how does these classical monetary instruments changed during the last 15 years? And if you then can name 3, 4 things we have invented in the central banks, then it is enough. Well, and then we are in the theoretical part, and I think what I did here in this last exercise today, there I went through all different theoretical models. What do I mean? I mean just this picture here. I think I do not have to recapitulate it. Now again, you also can keep in mind we then calculated in the Keynesian commodity market and within the ISLM model, we calculated the equilibria with specific functions. And in the ASID model and in the neoclassical view, we had the diagrams and the general argumentation, what happens. So then in an exam, I will not give you, for example, f of KL is square root KL and something else, and then please start to maximize profits. This we haven't done in the lecture, so I will not pose a question in the exam. But conceptually, the where do we have it? I think, did I do it here? Yeah, here the diagram explaining AS, explaining AD curve, explaining the long run equilibrium, and this diagram here explaining what is neoclassical theory about. So I'm really grateful that you listened that long. Do I have another 5 minutes? Because this is right over the end of my lecture. And here we have 3 fishes. And why do I show these pictures? Well, we just ask, what kind of fish is this one? What do you think? Or you can have a look at this name here. This is the Latin name. There you find Salmo trutta. Yeah. Mm. Okay, this is quite a good interpretation. Mm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Mm. Yeah. Well, this is a good idea, but it is not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is where do these fishes live? Mm. Where do you find these fishes? Yes, this is a sweetwater. This is a trunk. In German Forelle. This is a sweetwater. And the shark. This is salt water. And this is a so-called flounder, also in German and in English. And where does a flounder live? Yeah. Yes, it can live in both, and it is just living here outside us. This is it's living in the Watt. So this is then the brack water. So just dirt water where the sweet water comes into the oceans. Well, and what does this have to do with economics and macroeconomics in special? Well, look at the Nobel Prize winners in economics. Mainly, they come from the United States. And then you have different schools of thought in the United States, and maybe the United States look like this. And then you have many famous universities like Harvard, like Princeton, like Yale, and so on the East Coast. And then you have here, what could I mean with this, what I draw here? Yes, this is the Great Lakes. And what is the largest city at the Great Lakes? Or largest, not the greatest. This is Chicago. And Chicago is also a very famous university for economists, and especially the school of thought at Chicago comes from Europe, especially from Germany or from Austria. And this is Schumpeter and Friedrich Hayek. They moved to Chicago in the midst, we all know why, from Germany or Austria to the United States. And maybe you have heard of Hayek and Schumpeter in school. Well, Chicago is more or less the school with the neoclassical view. And here in Harvard and Princeton, the maybe most famous economist right now representing this school is Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner, I think 4 or 5 years ago. And here are sitting the Keynesians. And therefore, we talk in economics about sweet water and salt water. economics, because here you have the Atlantic Ocean, and so this is the salt water economics, and here Great Lakes, sweet water, so this is sweet water. Economics. Here you can say this is Krugman, Stieglitz, and so on. And here you could say Arrow, Lucas, and in front, of course, Hayek and Schumpeter. So these are two Nobel Prize winners, and these are also two Nobel Prize winners. Well, and then I step in, and I say, well, I'm a Bragwater economist. I just have a look on both views, and this is then the end of this lecture. I hope that I could have presented you both views, and that you choose your own view when you are going on in your studies and making some thoughts, where is our economy moving to? Okay, then thank you very much.